In the fall of 21, when Fire Shut Up in My Bones opened here at the Met, you became the first Black composer to have an opera presented in this house. But what you were talking about at that time were the composers before you whose operas hadn't gotten to the Met.
Right.
William Grant Still, Scott Joplin,
Yes.
so many. And you said, I may be the first, but I'm not the first who's qualified.
Right.
And I love that you were giving honor to that. And this is something that I think about so much in the world of classical music, because this story of the first and the
Yes.
only, right?
Yes.
That's sometimes the only story we hear, and it erases the important story of lineage. So you, as a jazz musician, your roots are in lineage. Like, that's how you
Yes.
build your musicianship, is on this known and felt and breathed lineage. And I'm wondering how it feels to you to step into this space where that knowledge is just starting to come to the foreground.
It's interesting because, you know, I just did a gig with Herbie Hancock, right, over the weekend. And I'm on the stage with him feeling blessed, you know, sharing a moment with him because of his lineage to Miles Davis, Miles Davis's lineage to Dizzy Gillespie, Louis Armstrong. And you start to feel honored to pick up that energy from people. Here, it's a little different, you know, because there are too many firsts still to have here. I think that's the big problem. You know, women being represented here, you know, people of all different backgrounds, you know, being represented. That still has to happen. And I think when that happens, then we could just start to really relax and just deal with the musical content of everything. Because that's the thing that really, that we all love and enjoy. I mean, you know, we're music nerds.
Yes.
So for us, it's about what's on the page.
Yeah.
You know, all of that other stuff, it's you know, it's history, and it matters, you know, because we want full representation. But I didn't come here for that.
No.
You know, as a matter of fact, when Peter asked me to bring Fire Shut Up in My Bones here, we didn't even talk about that. That wasn't a part of the conversation. It was a journalist, I forgot his name, who first asked me the question about it. And that was the first time I heard of it. So and I still didn't think it was true.
Right.
You know, because I'm like, no way, this is New York City, man. That can't happen here. But now I'm hoping that with the willingness of Peter and Yannick and everybody here at the Met to do more operas, more current operas, that you're going to see a wealth of talent and expression come to this room, which is really something that the entire industry needs and deserves, I think, because I see so many talented singers, man. It's amazing. You know, you can tell that they're not getting the opportunities that they deserve because they constantly prop each other up.
There's a community.
There's a community there that is in full support. You know, when Brittany got the role in Fire in Chicago at the Lyric, man, so many of her friends flew in town for the premiere. You know, I'm like, what are you doing here? Oh, we had to come support. And I love that, you know, but it speaks to a larger issue of underrepresented people, you know, in the industry. And you know, we have to address it. It's going to be a long road ahead of us, but you know, hopefully things will turn around.
So in the fall of 2021, I was working on a project that was centered around the Harlem Renaissance, and so I kept coming across references to Shuffle Along, which in 1921 was the first Broadway show by an all-Black creative team.
Oh, wow.
At least the first very successful one.
I didn't know that. Okay.
And Langston Hughes calls that the start of the Harlem Renaissance.
Wow.
And it was such a disconnect in my head, as you say, to be, you know, because there was a lot of press about Fire.
Right, sure.
100 years, fully 100 years later. And you're right. I mean, the tempo of that is all wrong.
It is. It is. And this is New York City. That's the thing that got me about this. This is New York. You know, this is the place where it's all supposed to happen. This is the melting pot. This is the city that's supposed to be the representation of what the country is supposed to be, in my mind. So I was shocked at that idea that, you know, it had been so long. And I think, you know, now I'm excited about the future because it's you know, it's so interesting because, you know, people kept talking about me being the first African American, but it's not just that. It's the culture.
Yeah.
It's all of it. You know, so many of the singers, you know, had in the production of Fire and in Champion, they grew up in the church, and when they entered into this realm, they're told to turn all of that off.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And my thinking is, I get it because that music didn't exist when Puccini was writing Turandot or any of those things, right? So I get that, but that shouldn't apply to me.
No.
You know what I mean? It here, we should be able to use all of those colors and tones to tell stories. And I'm excited about the possibility of it because you have those in our community who are strictly traditional opera singers. You know what I mean? That's what they studied from the time they started singing. And then you have those who were jazz singers who became opera singers. Then you have those who were church people who became opera singers. And my thing is bring all that to bear.
Yeah.
Put it all on the table because, we're trying to expand, this music, and we're trying to expand the audiences. I'll never forget when we did Champion in New Orleans. There was a gentleman, and looked like he could have been in his 70s. And that's important to me because we tend to look at, more mature people as being stuck in their ways,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
But he came up to me and after the show, after the production, and he said, "If this is opera, I'll come."
I love that.
So he saw himself and his culture on the stage in an operatic setting. And that meant a lot to him. And I think that's what we have to really be cognizant of in this business, because those of us who are musicians, of course, I can listen to Turandot. I can listen to, I haven't listened to the Ring Cycle lately because that'll take all your time.
You're too busy.
You know what I mean? But I love that music. I can listen to Salome all the time, but that's not for everybody. And I think what we have to understand is we need to create stories and create operas that relate to people's lives today.
But those stories related to people's lives in their time.
Exactly.
I mean, I think opera was always a form of entertainment for the people.
That's what I said.
Yeah.
I've always said that. I said, to me, when you watch La Boheme, and you see that parade thing and with all of those folks on stage, it's festive, and that came from someplace. It came from a culture, right, that existed at the time. I mean, it wasn't like he was looking into the future.
No.
When he was writing it, he was just basically representing his experiences musically. So that's what I'm trying to do here, bringing in elements of jazz, blues, and all of those different things into this realm.
Yeah. Well, that goes back to lineage. And I think, once we understand more fully the history of Black music across genre, then we understand that sound has always been there. That's, to me, what is so exciting about the Black composers who called themselves classical, who called themselves, I always go back to Ellington's quote, right? Two kinds of music, good music and the other kind.
Yes, exactly.
But that's what's been so exciting for me when I uncover the music of composers who were writing 100 years ago. Here they are, they're trying to enter into a completely white European space, but they're bringing their own sounds, their own traditions with them, and that resonates. And that's, I think, once we understand the density of that presence, it gives a new context to what's happening now.
It does, and also creates some new challenges. It does, because bringing in other cultures into this realm, the musicians have to get accustomed to it. You know what I mean? Because it's a little different from what they've been doing. The interesting thing about any of this stuff, whether you're a jazz musician or classical musician, we have our history and our lineage that we learn to prepare us to get to the point where we could function, right? So that library of sounds is always in our heads. But now when you start converging these things together, right, now you got something that's a hybrid, and you go, but wait a minute, how do I attack this? How do I do this? Like trying to have a jazz rhythm section with an orchestra, it's a challenge, because we all respond to the conductors a little differently.
Right.
For jazz musicians, we're right on the beat when a conductor does it. But with orchestras, they respond to the beat. You know what I mean? So just that little fraction of a second can create mayhem. you know, but we're all learning how to transition into this new world of bringing these things together. And Yannick is really great at figuring out ways of making it work.
Is it affecting how you write for this space?
You know what? It did at one point, but there was a gentleman I talked to a while ago, and he said, "Man, just write." He said, "You need to write what it is you're feeling." You know, it's a complex thing, you know, because Art Blakey used to tell us when I was playing with him. He said, "Listen, man, the easiest thing to do is to write some music nobody can play. You know, anybody can do that. You know what I mean? It's like just put 100 notes on a page." So I'm not trying to do that, but what I am trying to do is represent a culture in this room, and that's that can be new for other people, you know, and it's definitely new for both groups of folks coming together. But the cool thing about it, you know, when we were doing Fire, man, it gelled.
Yeah.
Because when it works, it works. It's like you go, oh, see, that's what I was conceiving in my mind, you know. But there's always this period of like, because listen, how many chances does an orchestra get to play a jazz opera here? Yeah. How many chances do the jazz musicians to play an opera? Period. You know what I mean? So everybody goes back to their own devices at some point. But it's exciting to experience, you know, and it gives me ideas about where to go in the future with other stories, you know, because the more, it's like anything else. When I was doing film, well, I'm still doing film, but when I started doing film, the more films I did with orchestras, the more experience I got, the more I started to understand how to make things work. So it's the same thing here. You know, I'm learning more about the voice now than I ever have in my entire life.
Than you ever wanted to.
Oh my God. It's crazy. It's really crazy.
You're talking about your opera Champion, which is on stage now.
Yes.
Your first opera, but your second opera to come to the Met, which makes you the first Black composer to have two operas.
Yeah.
You know, I think there's also a joy on the part of the musicians. I just played Ellington's New World of Comin' out on the West Coast.
Oh, nice.
And the orchestra musicians were so excited and
Yes.
so grateful. And they came to me
Yes.
and said, "Thank you for bringing this music to us." Because I think, look, all of us who have a classical training, we know we're missing some fun. We know we're missing some sounds. We know that, you know, we're getting constrained by tradition. And then I think there's also a fear of approaching anything new. So this hybridization of sound, it's going to be so healthy. For the future of the
It's
music.
definitely going to be healthy because I think, you know, with anything else, anything in life, if you're doing it over and over, there's a certain type of complacency that falls into place, you know. And it's really interesting because with that complacency, there's still interest. And I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about. Even though some of these singers are, you know, they're highly trained and beautiful voices, and they're immensely talented. But when they talk to me about the music they listen to before the show, it has nothing to do with what they do. You know, and I know that there's probably a yearning to express themselves in a different fashion at times. Not to say that you always want to do that, but you want to, listen, with the type of talent that's walking around this building, they could do a lot of things.
Yeah.
They could do a lot of things. So why not express that?
Yeah.
And give them room to do that. So, you know, I get excited about what the future holds for some of these opera singers, man, because I know the talent that's on that stage, and I know what they're itching to do, you know. And it's funny because, you know, when I wrote Champion, man, I just felt like I was just like a fish out of water, you know, like, okay, let me just do this. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, I'll just go back to being a jazz musician.
You have a good day job.
Yes, yeah, I was already covered. This is some lagniappe, as we say in New Orleans. This little extra, yeah.
You know, you talk about this community that you see around these singers, and I'll tell you, when I thought about that in 2021, that 100 years and the start of the Harlem Renaissance, and what did the Harlem Renaissance really mean? It meant that all of these things were born and created because of community, because of collaboration, and I do think that energy among artists, and now if you add in external support and awareness and excitement, I feel like this next period of time is going to be extremely fruitful.
Let me tell you, it's so crazy that I get all the credit for these operas, man. But there are so many people who are contributing ideas to it. You know.
Well, you're creating the space for them to do that.
I get that. I understand that. I do. I understand that. But at the same time, they're bringing so much stuff to it that I could never imagine.
Yeah.
You know, it's it's just beautiful to see. I mean, and I'm still scratching my head. I'm like, I don't know how the hell I got here, but this is weird. It's like, it's so bizarre for me. You know, I was supposed to be Miles Davis, the next Miles Davis in my mind. Wayne Shorter. You know, and then here I am over here, working with these opera singers and directors, and Peter Gelb's walking up to me talking about, hey, man, what do you think about this scene? I'm like, this is surreal. It's just crazy.
You know, I grew up in the opera house. I've been in the opera house since I was about 7 because I was a children's chorus member.
Oh, there you go.
And for me, the opera house was a place that I loved. I can remember the smell of it, the makeup, the whole thing. But it was a place of fancy velvet seats and fancy people. And this, just in these past years, your opera, Rhiannon Giddens and Michael Abels, their opera Omar, and the Hours, and all these new works that are attracting new audiences, it's a transformation of the art form. And I was so moved, I think is the word, that the Met has really made a commitment to a totally new balance of new work and of diverse stories. Are you processing your place in that? Because that's actually lasting. That's not being the first.
No, I'm not yet. I'm not yet, because I'm still processing that I'm even here, and that I get a chance to work with some brilliant people. You know, I didn't see this coming in my career whatsoever. You know, this just wasn't on my plate. Even though my dad loved opera and I heard opera a lot growing up in the house, you know, I just never saw this as something that would be for me. And the wild part about it, you know, when we did Champion in 2013, I got emotional during rehearsal because my dad used to sing in his group, and every Wednesday night they would have rehearsal, and sometimes he would take me. So, and most of those men in that thing were baritones for some reason. There were a few tenors, but my dad was a baritone. And it was interesting at the rehearsal for Champion because I'm having serious flashbacks to my childhood, you know, and that part was blowing me away. I'm like, and it was funny because it was almost, you know, you had to know me and my dad's relationship. We used to argue about music all the time, but never argued like, you know, do it because I say so. His thing was like, prove your point. He said, listen, man, come here, listen, see, that's the singer. You can hear, listen at the diction. I can understand what she's singing. We would have these things going back and forth. So to be in the operatic world, you know, I felt like my dad was looking down on me going, thought you'd get away, huh? Yeah.
Well, that's the best gift you could ever have given him.
I know. Me and my mom talked about it back then because we kept talking about how if my dad were here, we'd have to chain him to a chair because he'd be trying to be up on the stage and either take one of the arias or just be in the chorus or something, man. I said, man, no, can you sit down? They didn't hire you.
He's there.
Yes.
He's there.
Oh, for sure. I know. And it's one of those things. Me and my dad had like a really interesting relationship. After years of being in New York City, he called me one day. And he goes, I'm proud of you. And I go, why? He goes, because you stuck to your guns and you didn't let my opinion sway you. You know, and I'm feeling the same thing right now in reverse. It's like, wow, you know, you constantly planted that seed and now look what how it's bearing fruit.
Yeah. Well, I remember I read that I think when Fire opened, your dad would have been 100.
Yeah.
Yeah. So imagine things 100 years from now.
Crazy. It's really crazy because the thing that I think about now is what little kid is thinking about writing opera. Yeah. You know, that's what my mind is now, and I hope I meet that kid, and I hope I could help that kid in some way or some form. You know, because all you got to do is believe. Yeah. You know, and that's a hard thing sometimes because society always tells us not to. When I was a kid, people told me not to be a jazz musician because you weren't going to make any money, you weren't going to be able to support a family and all of this stuff. I kept hearing all the negative sides of it, and I guess I was too dumb to really let it take hold, you know. But I'm glad I didn't let it grab me in a negative way because I've had such a fruitful career, and all of it stems from me seeing my heroes and then getting a chance to meet my heroes. You know what I mean? Like meeting Miles Davis, Dizzy Gillespie, and all of those guys. That had a profound impact on me, you know, because in a weird way, they remind me of my dad. You know, had a serious passion for stuff, wasn't becoming famous weren't making, they didn't make a ton of money from it, but had a serious passion, right? And now I think about any little kid, because of social media and the way things are now, it's more accessible, you know, especially when we did the HD broadcast. You know, here a lot of people saw that. A lot of people were telling me they took their kids to see it. And it made me think about something I did with Herbie Hancock when we were moving the Monk Institute to New Orleans. We had a press conference and we busted in about 400 kids to come and hear Herbie and Wayne Shorter play. And Herbie says, we just got to grab one or two of those kids, because if we grab them, they'll influence the rest. So now multiply that by the number of people who saw the HD broadcast.
Right. Yeah.
You know, we just need to grab a few of those kids.
Yeah.
And then the rest will be history.
Let them fly.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.